places where people are hurting in the pocketbook is at the pump. And diesel fuel in particular has increased in price due to refining capacity. There's not enough supply to meet the demand. It's hurting truckers, it's hurting the market for small, clean diesel passenger cars. Why hasn't Congress mandated an increase in diesel refining capacity?
Because it's working very well for the industry. And so why would they do that? Profits are up, and they can have one refinery hire and drive up the price another 50 cents a gallon. If you look at the history over the last 20 years in the industry, massive consolidation in the industry among the big oil companies, vertically integrated oil companies, and numerous closures of refineries. In fact, there was some memos that Ron Wyden found from about a decade ago, and they've been in the press, I'm sure you've seen them, where there was a correspondence going around among the big oil companies saying, hey, we're losing money on refining. If we could only reduce refining capacity, we could turn that into a profit center, and that happened. But we've never been able to, Ron's asked for investigations, I've asked for investigations, never quite can prove collusion. I don't know why, even with emails. But anyway, that's what's happened. I mean, the guy who was head of Valero took over a bunch of refineries, and he was asked the question, he says, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to increase capacity? It's working fine for us. So that's the bottom line. It's profitable.
Congress cannot mandate out of the...
Well, how could you, I don't know how you could, you'd have to mandate private investment in construction, and Congress really isn't in that business, you could look at antitrust law, and you could look at some enforcement if you can prove collusion, or you could break up the big oil companies or the big mass refineries and try and make the industry more competitive again. That would be a way of dealing with it, but to mandate that someone build a refinery, I'm not aware of anything like that ever being done by Congress. I'm not sure whether it be constitutional to do that, because you're talking about private money. We're about, oh, sure, okay, that'll be the last one, because we're well over, so go ahead. Sure.
I want to compliment your staff some time ago. They helped understand the redress system within the Department of State on tax payments. It really helped do that. I got the problem solved because that's a done deal.
May have been Nick over there. Yeah.
On the other side, however, is that I am happy that the Tea Party had a great influence in this last debate about raising the debt ceiling. I am concerned that the debt ceiling has exploded. I've heard a lot of words today about taxes. I'm hearing a discussion about reducing the cost of government. And that, I think, has to happen. Our debt has increased $4 trillion in the last 2.5 years alone. And I'm concerned that what I'm hearing you say as a rational guy, Jim said you come across that way, and I agree. The question is, how can you, the rational guy, move the ball forward to reduce the cost of government?
Well, I talked about it earlier, and I didn't avoid talking about ways to save Medicare $400 billion over 10 years.
So how can you be effective, effective to do that?
Well, I think we need the parameters of a balanced budget amendment, and I'm one of the few people, who's willing to organize on the Democratic side, cross the aisle and say we need this. Because then when you're going to be confronted with decisions, and I'll come out to a town meeting and people say, don't cut this, and I'll say, okay, well, if we're not going to cut that, then we're either going to have to cut this, or we're going to have taxes, and then we have to make the tough decisions. Right now, we're avoiding the tough decisions. For someone asked about, I think it was here, or maybe in my last meeting, I'm sorry if it wasn't here, I just did a lunch too, but about the Ryan changes to Medicare and the privatization of Medicare and some of the other things there, and I said, well, it would save Medicare money, but all it does is shift the burden on individuals because it doesn't reform health care, and the estimates are that people who are 55 or less today would pay $800 more a month to get a private policy than they pay for Medicare. So we've got to deal with those kinds of choices as we approach these issues, and there's other ways, I believe, to solve Medicare's problems than turning it into that sort of a system and that sort of burden, because I don't know that many people can afford that much more per month. So, as I said earlier, we had an interesting coalescence in the Clinton presidency, which was modest revenue increases, although, you know, again, 4.6% increase for people at the top, but still relatively modest, much lower than tax rates from the 60s and 50s and early 70s. But we also had cuts, and we actually reduced the number of government employees during the Clinton era, which no one, you know, I mean, and in good part due to having a Republican Congress, but also because they had this reinventing government thing kind of worked a little bit, actually, that they talked about. And we had a surplus. So, but it was a combination of the two, and that's the only way we're going to get there in the future. And it means reviewing all parts of the government. You know, and I'll just end with this, but every agency of the government is audited every year, and they're scored, except the Pentagon, who spends more money than the rest of the government programs combined. They tried to audit them once, they couldn't, so they got an exemption and were supposed to be audited in 2003 and 4, and then they got another exemption. And actually, this is something I did in a bipartisan way to deal with our debt and deficit, is a guy named Scott Garrett, very conservative from New Jersey, and I offered an amendment on the Defense Appropriations Bill, which the Defense Appropriations chair, who's getting a little long in the tooth, didn't understand. And he just got mad. He always gets mad when I get up and try and cut something in the Pentagon. And he just got mad and said, oh, I don't care. It doesn't do anything. Go ahead and vote for it. Well, what we did is we precluded spending money on not auditing the Pentagon and enforcing the law to not audit them. And that just sounds really stupid, but you can't in an appropriations bill say it must be audited, because that's legislating. But you can say, we'll take away the prohibition on auditing, that's a limitation. So we did that. He didn't understand that if it withstands the Senate this year, the Pentagon next year will be audited for the first time ever. And everything is going to be on the table. We're more than 10 minutes over. I got a packed schedule, so with that, I'm going to have to go. Thank you very much.